Okay, thank you everybody for coming along to see me tonight. I'm going to talk to you about running your PHP project on AWS Lambda, so completely serverlessly, or on someone else's server, as somebody will point out. I work for a company called MyBuilder, and we are passionate about connecting homeowners with great tradespeople, and we help great tradespeople succeed with their businesses. So, roofers, builders, etc., to come and fix your leaking tap when it goes bang in the middle of the night. And we are looking for people to join our team. We are a small team. In our product and tech combined team, we're probably about 20 people. We are always looking for great talent to come and join us. So if you kind of like the idea of working with me, you probably don't. Or if you want to come and work for a very supportive and passionate team, then come and chat to me later on, or hit me up on Twitter or whatever. I'll give you my handle later on. So back to what we're doing. In fact, code. There is going to be some code in this presentation, but I don't expect you to keep up with it. It's obviously a PHP talk, so I assume most of you know PHP. My examples are in Symfony. You don't have to know Symfony. We're just thinking about concepts rather than actual concrete examples here, really. So back to what we are doing, which is running your PHP project on Lambda, otherwise known as coupling yourself to AWS for fun and for profit. So why would we want to do that? Why should we want to couple ourselves right into a cloud platform? If we think about the evolution maybe of a rather typical web application, we might start off with a single EC2 box and at some point think, okay, well, I'll move my data somewhere else. I'll pull it in a data store like RDS. And then what happens is you hear that you can get free SSL certificates from AWS, but the only way to work that with EC2 is to attach it to a load balancer, and that load balancer costs you $20 a month. You might as well have just bought the SSL certificate in the first place. It's costing you the same in a year. What the fuck is going on with that, right? And then later on, as your site starts to scale, you need to think about handling extra load. So you think, okay, we'll put extra boxes in, but you never know if you're actually utilizing these boxes at all. Well, you do if you use things like CloudWatch, but you're probably spending more money than you need to. It'd be really nice, because these things are all costing you money, it'd be really nice if we could just get rid of a load of that. It is possible to get rid of the data store as well, but that's beyond the scope of what we're doing tonight. So we're just going to try and eliminate a bunch of these costs. So say hello to Functions as a Service, or FaaS, or AWS Lambda, as AWS calls their offering. There are different, obviously, providers. And what FaaS does is it's kind of like a server that doesn't exist until you actually need it to do something, and then it goes away again once the job is done. So the anatomy of that might look something like this. You'll have a container that's running. You don't need to worry about that. And there'll be some sort of bootstrap code. And that bootstrap code just sits there. It doesn't cost you any money whilst that's running. And it waits for the request to come in. When the request comes in, the bootstrap code passes it to your application code. This is where you start paying. And then the application code does its thing, sends back the response, and you stop paying again at that point. You're only paying whilst this bit is running. And of course, that gets sent back to the client. The thing is, running PHP on Lambda, until quite recently, was a complete pain in the ass. What you had to do, there were a bunch of articles about it online, and they all revolved around the same kind of thing. The reason being that PHP wasn't natively supported by Lambda. You had a few languages like JavaScript, C#, Go, and Java, I think, and Python. So it all revolved around the same kind of thing, which was your bootstrap code would be some sort of JavaScript handler, which called a PHP binary which you had to compile and supply yourself, which then ran your framework code or your application code and then sent the response back to the client again. Again, this is the part that you're paying for here, and then you've also got to maintain that PHP binary as well. Now, around Christmas time, AWS announced something called Layers, which kind of changed the entire landscape of what we can do with serverless on AWS now. And in true AWS fashion, what they did was they released a bunch of documentation which is completely inaccessible to the average user and difficult to get to grips with. But there are some kind of core concerns about it, which is you can have up to 5 layers, and we'll go into layers in a bit. You can have up to 5 layers on your Lambda function. The total unzipped size of everything, so that's all your layers plus your application code, must be less than 250 megabytes. By default, you get 1,000 concurrent invocations of Lambda functions at the same time. And the maximum request body size you can have is 6 megabytes. So there's a couple of limitations, but they're not huge limitations. It just means that we maybe have to change the way that we think about some things. So what does that mean? So previously we had this kind of structure, but now what we have is the bootstrap code and the PHP layer and the handler is known as your runtime, which is what interfaces collects the requests from Lambda and passes them on to your application code. So again, that sits there waiting for a request to come in. That doesn't cost you any money. When a request comes in, it calls your application code, and then everything gets sent back to the client again. Trouble is, it's still a pain in the ass. You still have to supply that layer and the bootstrap code and the runtime as well as your application code. And that's kind of it's a pain. You don't want to have to do it. Bref is an open source project which aims to simplify everything so you only need to concentrate on making your code work. So it aims to make running PHP applications simple by removing choices so that we don't try to support every weird, obscure thing that you could possibly do. I mean, you can do it, but not by default. We provide simple and familiar solutions, again, instead of trying to provide powerful and complex and point-to-point implementations. And we empower by sharing knowledge instead of hiding things behind abstractions which will leak details, et cetera, et cetera. It aims to be very flat and easy to understand. So what does Bref actually do? It's a very good question. I'm so glad that you all asked it here. It provides documentation. It provides tasty desserts, or layers, actually. And it also has support for plain old PHP and also, 3 pretty big frameworks there. And there is no reason why we wouldn't be able to support other PHP frameworks. And what we use is something called SAM, which is an AWS package. Actually, it's an AWS program to do all the deploying. So we've kind of shifted that burden onto AWS now. Previously, we used serverless, but that didn't. The AWS changes meant that we could use SAM instead. So what happens now is we provide all of this, and you only need to concentrate on what you're doing. And when you deploy as well, SAM automatically pops an API gateway interface in front of it, which means that when you attach your free SSL certificate to the API gateway, you've actually got that free SSL that you were promised. You don't need your load balancer in front of that. So we've finally got something for free from Amazon. So let's dive in. Let's have a look at what's going on. So I've got a hello world.php script here, which is just going to pump out some information to the browser. What I can do, I can just require the package, so it's mnapoli bref. So I can just require that, and then initialize it, run the initialization script, and it's going to ask me what kind of Lambda function do I want to create. Now, obviously, I want to spit some stuff out into my browser, so I'm going to go for number 1, HTTP application. And you can see what it's done there is created a couple of extra files. It's given me an index.php and a template.yaml. Now, I don't care about the index.php. I've got my own hello world. So I'm going to delete that. And now let's look at the template.yaml. It's kind of a big and scary file, right? It's one of these here be your configuration, and if you make anything do anything wrong, it's all going to explode. So the thing to do is go in and have a look at that straight away. First of all, we've got this resources thing and some function stuff and the function name and everything else. I'm just going to change that function name to bref hello world, and I'm going to point the handler here to that hello world.php script that I've written. Simple enough. And a bit later on, we've got something about layers, and I'm going to change the region on that to EU West 1. The thing to remember is that layers are going to be, regions are going to become your enemy. They really, really are a pain to mess about with, and we'll see why in a bit. And we've got here as well, so we've got two paths which are defined. So we've got the first one, which is HTTP route, just says anything that matches the route, just pass this function. And then any subpaths or anything that matches also pass to here, but we could then pass that off to somewhere else if we wanted to. So how do we test locally? We're going to use, as I say, that SAM package has a kind of local Lambda-esque environment that you can use for testing. So each time you test locally, it kind of runs it in a Lambda environment and then stops. And what we do is we just install that with Homebrew, or if you're on Linux, you can use Linux Brew, which I highly recommend. It's a very, very good package, which gives you Homebrew for Linux, basically. And all we're going to do is tap AWS tap and then install the SAM CLI. So once that's done, we can do SAM local start API. And what we should get is a great API started up, except I forgot to start Docker. So I go back and I start Docker, and I do it again. And it says to me, yeah, I'm running on port 3000 locally. You can access that in your browser. So I click on it, and I get a big thing saying error. Now, the reason for that is because it says the layer is invalid. Now, why would that layer be invalid? I've copied this from the Bref website. I know that that layer exists, and it's correct. Well, the reason is Sam thinks I'm in the US East 1 region, and I've told the template that I'm in the EU West 1. So what I need to do is, there are a couple of things I can do. I can just pump this onto the end of the command and say, look, I'm in this region, or I can set it in my profile in my AWS credentials file. For now, we're just going to pop it on the end of here. This time when we go to it in the browser, we refresh, it downloads the layer and starts building. This takes a bit of extra time on the first request, but then after a while, we've got our PHP info running on a Lambda-esque environment with Hello World there as well. So this is kind of PHP running on Lambda. This is exciting. Except it's PHP info. Nobody cares about that, right? Nobody is excited about that. Plus, it's local. No one really, really cares at all. So let's think about deploying. Let's actually put that up somewhere. This is Sam again deploying on his little bicycle. To deploy, to get something live, I need to make an S3 bucket. So I can just use the AWS CLI again for this to make a bucket here. And it comes back and it says, yes, I've done that. That's all fine. This command is documented on the Bref website. This packages everything up and makes a deployment artifact and pumps it up to S3. So I've just replaced the bucket name there with my Bref Hello World, which is the one I just created. And it says, yeah, we've done that. And I can go into my S3 console and have a look around and see what's there. It's obviously created the bucket and it's put an artifact in there. Quite helpfully, Sam has said, hey, look, by the way, if you want to now deploy this and create your stack, here's the command to run. So point me to the template file and enter your stack naming. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put my own parameters in there, and I'm going to run it, and it's going to come back, and it's going to say, no, we didn't do that, because it's not like Amazon to tell me something wrong. What we have on the Bref website is the actual command you should run, which is this one. So when you run this command, it's going to go ahead and, by the way, everything I'm giving you here is the exact steps of what I took trying to set up the examples here. So these gotchas that you run into are things that I ran into as I was doing this. So I'm going to now go do SAM deploy, and it's going to say to me, I couldn't do it. And this was really annoying me at this point. And I didn't bother running this command to try and figure out what was going on. I just thought, right, let's go into visual mode, go into the CloudFormation console on my browser and have a look at what's happening. So I can drill in, and it said the bucket was in the wrong region. Remember what I said about regions, kids? They are a pain in the ass. So I just deleted the stack. I thought, there's nothing live on this anyway. Let's delete the stack. And this time, I create the bucket in the region that I want. and then I package and I deploy, and it says, yes, it's created my stack. So now I can go in, I can have a look in the cloud formation, and I've got green rather than red, which is a start, to be honest. You can see in the API gateway console here, we've got this entire execution pipeline set up. This is the API gateway stuff, and right on the end here, we've got the Lambda stuff, which is kind of similar to here. This is the API gateway stuff, and this is the Lambda stuff at the end of it. We've kind of echoed that from our original diagram. And I can go into my Lambda console, and I can see that I've got this Lambda function set up called Bref Hello World, which was what I'd called it in that template file. And I've got an online code editor for PHP. And if I have a look at the layers, you can see at the bottom here, I've got the layer that I selected, and which is in the correct region now. And if I go to API Gateway, you can see as well, I've got these two endpoints that it's created for me. So I can just click on that first one. Now this is actually PHP info running on Lambda. So that server effectively only existed to return this, and then it went away again. There's obviously still something running, but I'm not paying for that now. Now that I've got this back, I'm not paying for that. It's cost me literally nothing. Your logs will go to CloudWatch. I just want to make you aware of this. So your server logs will go to CloudWatch. So we've got here, this was after refreshing 10, 15 times. And I just want to draw your attention to here, this top two rows. These top two rows are the only rows in that log stream that says we are getting PHP FPM up and running. So with deploying with Bref, we have set up a PHP FPM instance, a PHP FPM server, which is sitting running as part of our bootstrap, that's not costing any money and is only costing money when the request comes in. But of course, we've all got our own domain names, and we don't want to be messing about with pissy CloudFront domain names. Especially because this is really ugly, right? And we've got this weird prod thing happening at the end. Like, I don't want to put prod in all of my roots. Now, imagine that you've got a domain name called kittyquotes.net, and the reason for that will become clear later on. But you've set up a subdomain, which is hello world. What I can do is go into the API gateway console and say, I'm going to register a custom domain name for this API. And I'm going to call it helloworld.kittyquotes.net, and I can attach my certificate to that. And I'm going to make sure that the certificate is registered in US East 1. It won't work with any other region. It has to be in US East 1. So if your certificates are registered in another region, you can copy them over. But API Gateway has to be US East 1 to use the SSL certificate. Your Lambdas can be in whatever region you like, but that's the only restriction on that. And then it's going to tell me it's going to take 40 minutes to do this. So I went and had a cup of coffee and then came back and thought, right, well, I should probably add some base path mappings on. Now, the base path mappings just says when something comes in to this domain name in this route, I should send it to that executable blah, blah, blah domain that CloudFront has set up for me. And you can see here, so I'm just saying anything at the root, send it to my Bref Hello World, and then it's going to go to that prod bit. Remember that weird prod bit that was over here? We're just going to say send it to prod. And that gets it out of my root. And I have this target domain name, which I can just copy and set as an A record alias in route 53. What happens then, I can go to helloworld.kittyquotes.net, and I have got, again, this PHP info that only exists when I'm making a request. And you can see at the top, I've got a nice green padlock. It's a secure request. I've got my free SSL on my own domain name. I think that's pretty good. There's obviously a lot of technical stuff going on behind this, but this makes it so simple to do that. As long as you remember regions, this is so simple. But still, nobody cares. So let's think about what we've looked at here. We've kind of thought about how applications might evolve, like how functions as a service can save us some money. We've used the SAM local stuff to have a look at how we can deploy. We've brought Bref into a project. We've had a look at the template.yaml. We've looked at the stack. We've tested things. We've done quite a lot of stuff here, and it's only taken a few minutes. But what about actual websites that people visit and spend money on? So, imagine you quite like cats, like I do. In fact, imagine that you are obsessed with cats to the point that you get your friends to send you pictures of their cats. And what you like to do is think about what historical figures those cats might be. This is a really photogenic cat, by the way, this one here. You think about what historical figures these cats might be and what kind of quotes they might come up with. So you've set up a website called kittyquotes.net. And you've got some CSS, and you've got some JavaScript, and you've got some images, and you've got a system that you can log into, and you've got a back end. This is using Easy Admin for Symfony, by the way. And you've got bits and pieces where people can upload files. It's a basic sort of kind of website that we'd all expect to be able to see, right? So can we adapt that to being completely serverless? Again, we need to remember a couple of things. First of all, Lambda is predominantly a read-only file system. You can only write to the temp directory. And again, the total unzip size must be less than 250 megabytes. So the first thing I'm going to do on my project is require Bref and then initialize it. Again, it's an HTTP application. It's going to be in the browser, so I'm going to select number 1, and it's going to spit out my template for me. And I'm going to change the function name to kitty quotes. I'm pointing the handler to my Symfony front controller. Now, and I'm increasing the memory size to 1024 meg. The default is 128 meg. The reason I've increased that is because with 1024, you get a more powerful CPU. So although that costs you money for the amount of time it runs for a lot less time, and you end up spending less money with more memory. And there are performance benefits, of course, as well. And at the top, I've just changed that from the default of my function to web application, and that will become clear a bit later on why we've done that. So I'm going to start the API from Sam Local again. And the first thing that happens when I try to access it is it says that something has gone wrong. Now, the reason something has gone wrong is because I forgot the very first thing that I just told everyone here, which was that the file system isn't writable. So I need to go in and I need to fix that. So in Symfony, in my kernel, I can just say, look, the cache directory, if we're in this Lambda environment, then we just write to the temp directory, and the same with the log directory. I think with Laravel, there's I can't remember the name, but there's a method I know in Laravel that you can do the same. It's documented on the Bref website. And it's going to bug me now till I remember it. Next time I refresh, I get this other error. It's PDO is missing, blah, blah, blah. I haven't got the PDO driver. Well, PDO is kind of important, right? I've got user-generated content. I've got stuff coming from the database. I need to be able to talk to my database. Well, this is documented as well on the website. It says that we have these extensions installed and enabled, and PDO is one of them. But what we don't have enabled is the PDO MySQL driver. So how do I do that? I need that. So how do I bring that into my application? Turns out all I need to do is create a php conf.d directory and put a php.ini inside it and just say, I want this extension. Next thing that happens is that when I refresh it, it doesn't give me that error about that I've enabled PDO just by putting that php.ini in it. There's nothing else to it. So now I need to connect the database. So let's think we've got this kind of structure going on here. And I'm going to put on an external data store, something like RDS. Now I can wrap it in a VPC, but there are performance concerns around that as well, which are pretty well documented. This isn't a Bref PHP kind of thing. This is an AWS Lambda and RDS VPC kind of thing. We'll talk about that in a bit. Now what I can do is set up environment variables in this template.yaml file. And you might think, brilliant, I can put my database URL in there. But stop, don't do that. Because you need to think about, am I going to commit this file? Am I going to put my database secrets in my Git repository and then do what I did and accidentally make it public and then have to spend time going back changing passwords and scrubbing repositories and all that kind of thing? A much, much, much better idea is to use the AWS Secrets Manager, pop your database connection in there, and then you can just use this resolve function to say, database URL is this, give it to me at runtime. Next time we refresh, we've got our database content. We do have, this is on SAM local again, and notice that we've got our assets and everything loaded in here. This is where I stop using SAM local because it's not actually true at this point anymore to what you see when you're running it live. But I'll show you in a moment. I'm just going to deploy this now. So again, we create a bucket and we package it. And this time I've actually put the region into my AWS credentials file so we don't run into any region issues again. OK, so it's failed to create the stack. Let's have a look. OK, so the unzip size must be smaller. In fact, this says 155 megabytes there. I assume what's happened is it said, right, your layers are X amount of size, and so I've only got 155 megabytes left to play with. So what can I do? Well, what I can do is remove all dev dependencies from my deployment, and I can get rid of the node modules. I only need them for doing the development until I actually create my JavaScript artifact. But then the trouble is, I've also got things like PHP Storm, and I've got my Git directory and stuff. I don't want to be deleting all of this stuff that's really useful to my tooling. And this only happens when you're deploying from local because you've got all these things on local. If you're going to deploy from your CI pipeline, then obviously your artifact is literally only production concerns anyway. So when you're deploying from local, the kind of way around it, it's a hacky way, I don't like it, but the way that I did it was to copy everything, create a script that copies everything from one place, my local development workspace, into another directory, installs the prod dependencies like that, and then deploys from there. So this is what my script looked like. I'm just copying stuff, removing a bunch of stuff, optimizing the composer autoloader without the dev dependencies, warming the cache, and then doing that. To be honest, creating a deployment script that does that was probably easier than just running these two commands each time anyway. And now I've got my stack created. So this is how it looks like on running live on Lambda, which is obviously different. I don't have that CSS and I don't have any of those images. So that's where sort of Lambda and SAM aren't really true to each other. So if you can, I think it's probably better just to test how you're going to see it. But we need to fix this, right? We need to do something about it. We're going to use a CDN. Luckily for Symfony, it's very, very easy to start doing stuff in CDNs. You just copy and paste some documentation. And I think it's pretty simple with Laravel as well. I think Laravel's got kind of similar documentation that you can just copy and paste. So I'm just going to do that. Pop that into my Webpack config. Run the on-call production, and then when I redeploy, fantastic. Look at that, how nice is that? But I am still missing my images. When I log in now, let's have a look. OK, my nice, fancy, easy admin panel has completely gone. So I need to fix that as well. And what I need to do is just tell the framework where to look. I've told JavaScript where to look for the images. I need to tell the PHP framework now where to look for the assets even. Once that's done, I've got my JavaScript and my CSS all in. But then clicking around, I suddenly get kicked out. Now, why would I get kicked? Anybody that's done anything with load balancing or distributing applications across servers will know exactly why that is. It's because my sessions are currently held on just one invocation of on just one box here, basically. And the next time a request comes in, there's absolutely no guarantee it's going to hit that same box and it's going to know anything about that previous session. So what I need to do is move the sessions into a centralized data store. which will be my database. And again, Symfony makes this really easy. Laravel as well. Again, when I looked into it, makes it easy. And I'm sure for any framework, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. So we just copy and paste some stuff. We don't really need to think too much about what we're doing. We just kind of need to understand what we're doing and why. The next thing, of course, though, is to create the table on the database that's going to hold the sessions. So we create a migration file. But this brings up another problem. I need to run the migration. I don't want to go in with SQL Pro or Datagrip or whatever and start doing stuff on the database. I want to make it all happen through migrations. But I don't have a box to SSH into and run. So how can I solve that? I need to be able to run my console commands. Well, if I add to the template file a console resource, so you can see now why I called that web application before and this one console. What I've done is added this, and at the bottom here I'm just saying I need the PHP layer and the console layer, and then at the top I've moved the database stuff into a global variable in the template file. That means that's now shared across both the web application and the console. Then what I can do is I can run quite a long command, but it basically looks like this. So saying Bref CLI, and we give it the name of the function we want to run, 2 dashes, and then underneath the name of the actual command that we want it to invoke. And when we've done that, we've got the console command is run remotely on Lambda. That means that I now have that database structure that I wanted, and I can click about as much as I like. But we've still got a little bit of work to do here. We're going to make this into a serverless application that's not going to cost us any money. We've still got a bit of work to do. We need to address why we've got no images. So I want to put a file store on that the application knows about. So in Symfony, I can just say, hey, look, here's a parameter with an environment variable in it. And I can tell Easy Admin that's where it needs to look for any images that I upload. And then I can also set, so there we are, there's the uploads environment variable. And I've got my images back on my back end here. Now for the front end, I need to create a Twig variable, a global variable in Twig, tell Twig where to look for it, and I've got the same pictures of cats again back on the front end. So as far as the front end is concerned, everything is now working as well as it did earlier. Your visitors will never know the difference. But we need to upload new cute pictures of cats. The trouble is we can't upload to Lambda directly. We need to think of another way around it. And the serverless way is going to be pre-signed URLs. So show of hands, who has worked with pre-signed URLs before? A couple of people. Who knows what they are but hasn't used them? 1 or 2 people. OK, so pre-signed URLs work like this. You start off with your client, and your client says to the server, I really want to upload this picture called cutecat4.jpg. And the server says to Amazon S3, this person is going to upload something called cutecat4.jpg. And Amazon says, OK, great, here's a URL that they can put this file to, and it's got a token in it, and it expires after some time. And the server says back to the client, OK, look, here it is. Make sure this file name matches what you told me it's going to be, and here's the token, and you've got this amount of time to do it in. And the client then says to S3, here's that file I told you were going to get. And S3 goes, brilliant, great, I was expecting that. And then optionally, your client then can then say to the server, hey, I did that, do what you want to do. And the server, again, optionally can just go, hey, look, we had this file before, let's delete it. That means, so in my admin controller, I've just added a couple of methods to do that, to give me this pre-signed URL action and to actually upload the kitty image. And I've got some JavaScript, which actually does, obviously, the back and forth in the browser. Now, it is jQuery. Please don't hate me. But it also means that I can remove a bunch of stuff that I had that I didn't like being in there before. So I can remove this uploading bundle. and I can remove stuff from my entity which was only there to facilitate the Vich uploader bundle. So I can get rid of that. That was kind of muddying my entity, so I can drop all of this code. And now I've got this thing. I can select a cat, and I can say, hey, look, let me upload something from my massive collection of screenshots of cats, and then I can upload it. And I can change the pictures of the cats. So let's recap again here. So we have added Bref to an existing site. We've fixed the assets by moving them to a CDN, again, making our site look pretty. We've moved the session storage to a database. We've ran console commands, and we have used pre-signed URLs for image uploading. We now have a fully functioning website without a single web server on it. The only server that we have now is our database instance. And again, we can get rid of that, but we're not going to do that today. So that's pretty exciting, right? There's a sea of blank faces, but it's exciting because it means I can save a load of money. But let's think about performance. Does it perform well? This is cold boots, by the way. I like to think about cold boots. Somebody said to me, yeah, but it's not really cold boots, it's cold starts. But I ignored him anyway because I like this image. We talked about things being inside a VPC, a virtual private cloud. There is a well-documented issue with Lambda that if you have RDS, the thing inside a VPC, and you have RDS, it really, really, really increases the cold start time. Now, a cold start is this bit here between Lambda beginning to bringing up the first instance of your container up to it being ready to start accepting requests. And then once it's accepted the first request, then everything else gets a warm start. But this is where most of the time is. In a VPC, it has all this extra stuff to do. So it really, really, really slows things down. In fact, a cold start without a VPC so no VPC, cold start is 0.93 seconds. 9.83 seconds if you do have a VPC. Amazon are working on that, and they promised it would be early 2019 that they would fix it by, but I haven't seen anything yet about that. So what you have to do is choose between putting things in a VPC and having security or having something fast. It's your choice. But there are ways to mitigate it. You can try to keep your Lambdas warm just by pinging them at regular intervals. It's a bit of a shit solution, but at the moment it's kind of the only thing that we've got. And if you're using services like Pingdom, then you're going to kind of get that anyway, because you are just going to be hitting your service and hopefully keeping it warm. And you can kind of lower the risk of any of your users seeing that cold start time. But what we want is fast PHP. Like, we want things to be really fast, right? We want to make sure that our stuff is really quick. Now, this is some benchmarking that Matthew Napoli, the chap who wrote Bref, did when we were first playing with layers. There's a lot of figures on there. There's a few things to look at. So E and F, bit lower down. This is what we can kind of achieve. So 5 milliseconds for PHP or 18 milliseconds for Symfony. On just serving it over the FPM solution that we have. If you decided to go for more of a React PHP kind of approach, which again is possible, we have that capability now by altering the runtime code, you can get PHP down to about 4 milliseconds and Symfony down to about 6 milliseconds. So Symfony is 3 times faster if you do that. But that's experimental, and there's dragons and death and everything waiting around for you there, because you've got extra concerns to think about. What about savings? You want to see something really cool. This is my AWS Billing Console. I started using Bref around September time last year, and I was hosting just a bunch of sites, and each one of them had a load balancer, so I could get my free SSL, which wasn't free in the end because I was paying for the SSL certificate through the balancer and stuff. Anyway, so I started playing with Bref around September time, and you can see between September and November, I have spent, since November, I've spent nothing on load balancers. and I've been shutting down EC2 boxes. My AWS bill is now about a third of what it was before I started playing with Bref. And that's just because I'm able to eliminate some of these costs. My only real cost now is one RDS box and one EC2 box, which I haven't yet shut down because it's hosting one last site, and I can't bring that site into Route 53 and deal with these things. So once that's all shut down, then I will have almost zero cost. What about scaling? So this is something new that I didn't know about until, well, a couple of weeks ago. Somebody posted on the Bref GitHub page and said, look, this is my use case. So this was someone who came up to us and said, we have got this in production, because previously we were saying, well, in theory it should scale because people have got huge node applications running on top of Lambda, right? So why should it be any different for PHP? But we just didn't know. We didn't know of any examples of it. And then somebody said to us, well, I've got one. And I'm using a custom runtime based on top of Bref. We made some alterations. We had some extra requirements, primarily because they're using Falcon. So they had to support Falcon with what they were doing. And they are using a load balancer in front of Lambda instead of API gateway. And they're using CloudFront caching quite heavily, I think. So not every one of their requests gets all the way through to Lambda. They're trying to obviously mitigate that. But what they are seeing is that they are serving 40 million requests a day. Their average response time on their API is 90 milliseconds. They have asked AWS to increase their you remember that 1,000 concurrent invocation limit? They asked Amazon to increase that. So at peak time, they're getting 2,500 concurrent invocations, and they are still seeing a 25% cost saving on what they were spending with EC2. And they said that's without even taking into account hidden costs like data transfer in and out of EC2 regions and EBS and other things like that. So they are immediately making massive, massive savings. And then they've also got instant scaling, because Lambda scales. As many requests you make it will handle. What about going further? What about things like microservices? Because we're all into microservices these days, aren't we? What we can do, maybe you don't want to have a full framework and everything behind what you're doing. Maybe you just want a simple function that says, receive something from SNS and then goes, this is my job, I'm going to do it, and then we spit something out. Well, we can do that because we can say, I just want to create a PHP function, and I can give that something, it can do something, and it can shut down. I don't need to have a framework. I don't need the FPM layer. I can just have the PHP layer, and that gives us something very, very, very small that we can work with. But I know you're all now asking, how do I create my own layers? Because I've got so many things that I want to do with this. So rolling your own. There are a couple of solutions, none of which are the perfect fit right now. But these chaps in America, STech Studio, they created a bunch of extensions for kind of a bunch of tools to help you create extensions for common tasks. The other thing that you can do is just clone the project. And then you can go in and you can edit the Docker file. And you can say, hey, look, maybe I want MySQLi because I really want to run WordPress on this. So you can then go and put MySQLi in there, and you can run the make publish script, and then your fans whir for about 15 minutes whilst Docker runs and compiles and spits out a layer that you can use. The only caveat with that is then that you have to maintain that layer. We are working on better documentation for creating layers, because you can create layers, your own layers, tiny layers, which will run on top of Bref. You wouldn't need to compile absolutely everything. But I hear you ask, did you mention WordPress? I did mention WordPress, and this is as far as I got with it before I thought, it was a proof of concept. Could I make WordPress run on it? I didn't bother with assets. I didn't bother with CDNs and stuff. I don't know enough about WordPress to really sort of go down that rabbit hole. But I can't see why it wouldn't be possible if the right plugins and tools are available there. So what are we working on at the moment? We're working on better documentation. We aim to make things accessible by giving documentation. That's one of the primary goals of the project is to make this kind of the #1 resource. We're looking to be the kind of de facto standard for running PHP on top of Lambda. We're working on things like speed and stability. We've got plenty of bug reports and use cases and things coming through, which is fantastic because we kind of understand now how people are using the package. Again, documentation on creating your own runtimes and layers, and better integration for different frameworks. But the thing to do is come and join us. We're open source. So come and try it out and tell us your use cases and let us know what works and what doesn't work and how things are going for you. Because the more that we understand, the better we can do. Come and join me at My Builder because it's a great place to work. But also, yeah, go to the website. And if you want to slide into my DMs, this is my Twitter handle, and let's talk. So I know that's been quite a long time, but does anybody have any questions for me? We've got one over here. Do we have a microphone? Yes, we do. No. No.
Testing. Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Okay, we're on. I was just wondering if you, why you weren't using Aurora serverless to get the data store cost down to 0 as well.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing. When I get a spare weekend, I'm going to bring my data store costs down to 0. Either that or by using the MongoDB that they give you on the free tier, whatever. Like for my own costs, I'm going to do that, but I can certainly bring those costs down. There is an Aurora serverless API. Last I heard about that, the performance of that wasn't great. I haven't looked into it myself, but Matthew did look into it, and he said that the performance of it wasn't really worth his while at the moment.
Yeah, I tried it with Bref, the earlier version, and it worked fine. But
oh, really?
I didn't test performance too much.
Okay,
but
sure. Well, that's interesting to know. Thank you for letting me know. Has anybody else got any questions? Yeah, we have one.
I'm just wondering,
yeah.
if you get billed for sort of the time you use and the computational power,
yeah.
If we were just to send loads and loads of requests, could we bankrupt you?
You can try. You can go to kittyquotes.net now. There's no internet in here, is there? Does it work yet? I don't know.
Free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, free Wi-Fi. Okay, so you can go to kittyquotes. The first one to get there will get the cold start, and then everybody else will get it quick. But you get 1 million requests free per month on the free tier. So, and you're not going to do 1 million between you. And then it costs like pretty much nothing anyway. You have got no chance of bankrupting me. That's not a challenge. Because
Is there any Russian bots here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I would just pull it. But I'll just put an edge cache on the front of it, and then we'll be fine. But the point is, it costs so much less than running an EC2 box, and it's a lot easier to maintain than patching and stuff. And one of the things I didn't say actually is that layers, you can do so much with the layers. You can compile anything that you want within reason into layers. So you might be able to do things like put on the Blackfire extension or put Xdebug on or whatever. I don't know why you might want to, but you could put Xdebug onto a layer. Maybe you'd want to, maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. But there is so much. There's so much that I don't have time to go into. It's so exciting. And I would say definitely just go to the website and have a play and let us know what your use case is. We've got a couple more.
Hiya.
Hi.
Any specific or special security considerations to take versus a normal standard PHP deployment?
It's just a standard PHP project. So any security concerns that you have with your current PHP systems is the same. Like it's the only thing that's changing is that we're putting the application on the server that isn't there for a lot of the time. But it does also give you an interesting thing that you get with API Gateway is that you can just disallow any route that doesn't match anything. It's a bit more maintenance, but you can just disallow, for example, any route that doesn't match something in your PHP application. So you've instantly got an extra kind of added layer, and you can put the web application firewall on and stuff, which you get, I think, for free with API Gateway as well. So then you get this added layer of security where Amazon is looking out for common exploits for you. And so you do actually, you potentially do get added security just by using the API, the system behind API Gateway instead.
Does that mean, sorry, that you need to add all the routes in all the routes in the thing?
If you wanted to disallow all routes other than yours, then yes, so it is a bit more maintenance. But if you use the web application firewall, then no. Like you can just like do some basic configuration on that, and that will automatically then start listening out for you very, very quickly.
Thank you.
All right. I think, did we have one more? Oh, two more.
What do I do?
How easy would it be to port it onto a different cloud provider?
Okay, so the previous version of Bref was running on top of the serverless framework, and we were trying to support lots and lots of cloud providers. But it turned out that we could only really support Lambda, and because we're using SAM now, you wouldn't be able to, not without a lot of work, because the layers that we have are compiled within AWS's own EC2 environment. But we kind of figured that AWS is kind of the most used or the most kind of ubiquitous cloud provider. Obviously, there are others, but we're thinking like a lot of people are on Lambda, therefore we should support that very, very well rather than trying to do everything and not doing anything that great. So if you're using something else, then you're kind of out of luck with us. But if you move to Lambda, then we've got you covered.
Any more questions? I think we've got time for one more. Yeah, we've got one more.
It was just a question. Would it really be, would you use Lambda for mainly applications you're planning on scaling, or would it be worth using Lambda for very personal sites, small sites? Is it even worth it? Like the amount of hassle from some of the issues you've come across, is it worth it?
Okay, so the issues that I come across, you only come across once, because once you've done it, you go, oh, fuck, it's the regions again, and you pay more attention to the regions the next time. I've moved my personal sites onto it, simply so that I don't have to pay like £8 a month for an EC2 box and then whatever for the SSL certificate, and I don't have to maintain an EC2 box. I don't need to keep patching it and worrying about if anyone's managed to SSH in or whatever. So I think for the amount of hassle it takes off of your plate, I think one or two kind of like tripping wires in getting used to it the first time round is definitely kind of worth it, I think. The cost benefit alone for me has been outstanding.
Okay, any questions on this side? No?
No, I've bored everybody to death. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much, Neal.
Thank you.